Hello. This is additional material on the Japanese-American experience during World War II. I want to focus on two things. One, the military intelligence service, and two, the resistors. First, the military intelligence service. This is from Kelly Nakamura, 2016, who said that under a shroud of secrecy and with the backing of the United States War Department, the Military Intelligence Service, the MIS, trained and graduated nearly 6,000 linguists, the majority of whom were Japanese Americans. Due to the security classified nature of their activities, Nisei members of the MIS never received as much publicity as their counterparts in the 442nd Regimental Combat Team and the 100th Infantry Battalion. They ultimately played a decisive role in the victory of American forces over Japan in the Pacific. They were among the first soldiers to arrive in Japan after their surrender, and they became some of the first American observers to witness the destructive effects of the atomic bombs that had been dropped on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. The Nisei later served in important positions in the occupation of Japan, and more than 70 MIS linguists provided translation and interpreter services for the war crime trials held in Japan, China, the Philippines, French Indochina, and the East Indies. As Japanese Americans, these linguists turned out to be instrumental in bridging cultural and linguistic differences and helped to establish the foundations for post-war relations between Japan and the United States. Now I'd like to talk about Japanese American resistors. These were Niseis who refused to go into the draft. In Eric Mueller's book, Free to Die for Their Country, he said that in January 1944, the government announced that it would begin drafting the very same Japanese American men it was jailing on suspicion of disloyalty. By early February, young men at the 10 relocation centers began receiving notices directing them to report to their local draft boards for their pre-induction physical examinations. They were to join the same army that had been guarding them for years and that had continued to aim weapons and searchlights at their parents and siblings. This extraordinary government demand left these young men with no good choices. On one hand, they could swallow their outrage at years of mistreatment and leave captivity to fight for someone else's freedom. To do this would mean more than risking their own lives. It would also mean leaving their families behind to uncertain futures as wards of a hostile government. On the other hand, they could give voice to their outrage and resist the draft. To do this was to risk prosecution, many more years of incarceration, and the lifelong stigma of a felony conviction. Most of the young men in the camps choked back their resentments and chose to accept the draft as just another unwanted test of their patriotism. Many served bravely in Europe with the 442nd Combat Team, the racially segregated battalion for Japanese Americans that the Army created for them. Some lost limbs, others their lives. Some of the internees, however, made the other choice and refused to comply with their draft orders. Usually, these were solitary acts of disobedience. At Minidoka, for example, nearly 40 young men ignored their draft notices, each unaware that others were doing the same. At the Heart Mountain relocation, on the other hand, draft resistance became a noisy and well-publicized political movement that led nearly 90 to resist. In all, more than 300 Japanese Americans from the 10 camps refused to show up for their physical examinations for induction. They pressed a simple moral question. If we are loyal enough to serve in the Army, what are we doing behind barbed wire? Not only did the government decline to answer the question, but it punished the resistors brutally for asking it. Through the spring and summer of 1944, agents of the U.S. Marshals Service came to their tar paper barracks and arrested them on charges of draft evasion, carting them off to local jails to await trial. Their cases came to trial in federal courtrooms across the western United States in the summer and fall of 1944. The movie Only the Brave tells a little-known story of heroism during World War II. But there were acts of bravery happening in the Pacific as well. And even back at home, Japanese Americans were having their courage tested too. This is Don Maguili. More later.